Marina Duarte lived a quiet life in the countryside of Minas Gerais, Brazil. Her neighbors saw her as reserved, soft-spoken and always tired, but gentle. She wore plain clothes, spoke little, and seemed entirely devoted to her children. Behind the walls of her modest home, tragedy followed her like a shadow. In 2010, her 3-year-old son, Lucas, suddenly became ill. Dizzy, nauseated, weak, no fever, no trauma. Doctors couldn't explain it. Hours later, his heart simply stopped. A death ruled as sudden and natural. Marina cried silently at the funeral. She didn't scream, didn't ask why, just lowered her head, thanked people for their condolences, and went home. Everyone thought she was just broken, but years later, investigators would revisit that moment as the beginning of a nightmare no one saw coming. Life seemed to resume after that. Marina had more children, moved a few times. Her new neighbors noticed how quiet her home always was. Too quiet. By 2013, her middle child began missing school more often. He complained of stomach pain, dizziness, fatigue. Symptoms came and went. One day he was weak, the next he was fine. Doctors suspected stress. Marina always insisted it was nothing. She never demanded answers. She never seemed truly afraid. It was as if illness no longer shocked her. Teachers started noticing something off in her son's behavior, sluggish, detached, and tense. But Marina reassured everyone. He's just sensitive. And with her soft voice and tired eyes, no one questioned her. No one imagined this was the next chapter of something far darker, because once again, a child in her care was slowly fading. In 2019, tragedy struck again. Her youngest child, Daniel, only 5 years old, died in his sleep. His symptoms were vague: fatigue, loss of appetite, mild fever. He was hospitalized but released without a diagnosis. Hours later, he was gone. The cause? Cardiorespiratory arrest, another silent funeral, but this time a paramedic who had seen the child days before raised concerns. His body had appeared too weak for someone with such mild symptoms. The authorities made note, but without solid evidence, nothing was done. Marina stood by the casket, calm as ever. "It was his time," she whispered. Family members began to feel uneasy. Her grief seemed rehearsed, her pain muted. But the system saw no crime, only a grieving mother. Again. And Marina moved on with one less child and one more secret. The pattern was clear, but invisible to those who didn't know where to look. Every child had months of mysterious symptoms. Every death occurred at home. No witnesses, no cameras, no clear medical explanation, until someone outside the family finally saw the red flags. A volunteer therapist named Helena Ruiz was working with Marina's only surviving child. He was quiet, anxious, and often repeated one unsettling phrase: "Don't eat what Mum gives." Helena documented it. At first, it was brushed off as childhood fear or trauma, but she reviewed the family's history and felt a chill. 2 siblings dead, 1 sick, all under Marina's watch. She submitted a report, not an accusation, but a warning. And it was that single report that broke open a case that had been hidden in plain sight for over a decade. The social worker's visit was unannounced. What he found disturbed him. A spotless house, children moving slowly, eyes glazed as if sedated. One boy had visible burns on his arms, said to be from a fall. But something felt wrong. The air was heavy, tense. The children barely spoke. The social worker flagged the visit. Police launched a quiet inquiry, cross-referencing medical records, school reports, and past complaints. The pieces began to connect. Every child showed the same trajectory: gradual symptoms, erratic behavior, strange fatigue. And Marina, always the only adult present, no one had ever questioned her. But now, eyes were opening. Investigators brought in a toxicologist to examine the symptoms. His response was chilling. They matched long-term exposure to poisons like arsenic or cyanide. Suddenly, it wasn't just suspicion, it was a potential serial crime. An emergency order was issued to exhume the bodies of Lucas and Daniel. Their remains were transferred to the National Institute of Forensic Medicine under high security. Technicians worked carefully, knowing that time and decomposition could have erased crucial evidence. But what they found shocked everyone. Lucas's remains contained traces of a banned pesticide commonly used in agriculture, known to cause nausea, fatigue, and heart failure in small doses. Daniel's tissues also showed signs of chronic poisoning. Authorities immediately shifted the investigation. Marina Duarte, once seen as a grieving mother, was now the primary suspect in multiple suspicious deaths. And the question changed from what happened to how many times has she done this? Investigators began combing through Marina's home. Inside the cabinets, they found unlabeled bottles, expired medications, and chemical compounds with unknown origins. Some cleaning supplies were not registered under her name. She had no background in chemistry, so where did these come from? Experts believe she used minuscule doses to cause recurring symptoms, just enough to confuse doctors and build a believable narrative. Over time, this allowed her to construct the image of a suffering, devoted mother. One bottle contained residues matching the same toxin found in her children's remains. Another detail sealed her undoing. A surviving child was ready to speak, a boy who had seen and felt it all. The eldest son, Matteo, now a teenager, was brought in for questioning. He was pale, fragile, and at first silent, but slowly he started describing a chilling routine. Bitter teas forced down his throat, unexplained drowsiness, waking up at night unable to move. He said his sister once whispered to him, "Mom wants me to stay asleep forever." Investigators were stunned. The boy remembered feeling sick after every meal, and how Marina warned him never to talk to doctors. "They don't understand us," she'd say. His testimony was haunting, and when asked how he survived, he replied, "Maybe she was saving me for last." That was enough for a judge to issue an arrest warrant. Marina Duarte was taken into custody in the middle of the night. She didn't resist. She only asked, "Who told?" In her first interrogation, Marina said nothing. Her face was unreadable. No panic, no denial, no tears. Her lawyers insisted there was no physical proof tying her directly to the deaths, just theories and memories. But the prosecution had more. They had her internet history. Recovered from an old phone, investigators found searches like how to poison slowly without trace and symptoms of arsenic in children. She had joined online forums discussing silent control over family members and even downloaded PDFs on chemical-induced illness. One browser tab remained open on the day of her arrest. How long does pesticides stay in the blood? For the police, this was no longer a mystery. It was method. The case exploded across the media. Newspapers called her the poisoned mother. TV anchors debated whether she was a psychopath or mentally ill. Some viewers sympathized, suggesting trauma or misdiagnosis. Others called for life in prison. Psychologists weighed in, diagnosing potential Munchausen by proxy syndrome, where caregivers harm others for attention. But Marina never spoke. In jail, she rejected visitors, refused to eat communal meals, and spent hours writing in a notebook hidden beneath her mattress. Guards said she never cried. She only watched, cold, still. Every day, her silence screamed louder. And as forensics uncovered more toxic residue on spoons, cups, and even a child's toy, the pieces kept falling into place. The woman once pitied had become a symbol of something far more chilling. As the trial approached, a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation was conducted. Two independent specialists spent weeks interviewing Marina. They weren't looking for madness, but for comprehension. Did she understand what she was being accused of? Could she distinguish right from wrong? The answer was unsettling, yes. Marina was found fully competent. No signs of delusion, psychosis, or loss of touch with reality. What she did display was chilling emotional detachment, exceptional logic, and zero remorse. The experts described her as someone who had compartmentalized her emotions, separating guilt from action. If she committed those crimes, they concluded, it wasn't from confusion. It was from choice, calm, deliberate, and terrifyingly conscious choice. The trial began under intense media attention. Every seat in the courtroom was filled. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters captured every moment outside. Then came the most devastating testimony, the voice of her son, Matteo. He sat behind a screen to protect his identity, but his words pierced through. He spoke of nights where his siblings cried before falling asleep, of Marina whispering that only she knew what was best, and of the dread he felt every time she prepared food. His voice trembled, but never broke. His truth was raw. The defense tried to discredit him, saying his memories were manipulated, but no one in the courtroom believed that. Not after seeing his eyes, not after hearing him say, "She made me love her," while she was killing us. The digital forensics team uncovered even more disturbing evidence. Hidden in an encrypted folder on Marina's old laptop were documents titled Submission, Purity, and The Quiet Path. They contained disturbing writings, some poetic, some clinical, describing control, obedience, and sacrifice. One document was a list, no title, just names, dates, and single words beside them: cleansed, liberated, ready. Some names were crossed out. Some were her children. Others were still alive. Investigators believe it was a private record of her actions. The courtroom gasped when the list was projected on screen. And with that, the idea of this being a case of mere mental illness faded. It was now viewed as ideology, a personal doctrine, cold and lethal. The defense tried to change the narrative. They claimed the toxins could have come from environmental exposure, contaminated food, or someone framing Marina. But the evidence was overwhelming. Toxic residues matched kitchen items used only by her. Past letters to a family in Portugal were revealed, including one from a year before Daniel's death, in which she wrote, "Sacrifices hurt, but they must be done. Not everyone understands their purpose." Prosecutors presented this as proof of intent, a mindset not born from rage, but conviction. Marina never explained the phrase. She never explained anything, but the more she stayed silent, the louder the horror grew. She wasn't losing control. She had simply never given it up. Marina's family history added even more darkness. Her own mother had died under suspicious circumstances when Marina was just a teenager. Some relatives recalled that Marina changed drastically afterward, isolating herself, speaking of voices and purification. Her grandmother, it was later discovered, had been institutionalized in the 1960s for religious delusions. Were these generational traumas, signs of undiagnosed disorders, or the roots of something more sinister? One psychologist suggested that Marina wasn't acting out of psychosis, but out of inherited ideology twisted through silence. Still, no diagnosis could fully explain what she had done. It wasn't the illness that terrified the public. It was how normal she seemed. A mother, a neighbor, a quiet woman who knew exactly how to stay invisible. Among the most heartbreaking discoveries was a drawing found tucked inside a memory box belonging to her youngest daughter, Sophia, who died in 2019. It looked like a child's innocent doodle, scribbles, hearts, a stick, figure holding hands with a taller one. But at the bottom, in shaky handwriting, it read, "If I eat it, Mommy smiles." Investigators froze. That sentence said more than any confession ever could. It revealed how deeply Marina had manipulated her children, not just physically, but emotionally. She didn't just poison their bodies, she rewired their love, making them believe obedience meant survival. The drawing was entered into evidence as both symbol and warning. The face of evil can wear the softest smile. In the final week of the trial, Marina broke her silence. The courtroom held its breath as she stood. No apology, no denial, just a strange declaration. "I took care of them. I prepared them. No one else would have done it. I did it with love." She repeated it twice, then sat down. Her voice was calm, her eyes blank. Was it a veiled confession, a justification, or something more twisted, a belief that what she did was noble? The jury looked shaken. Some cried. Others stared at her as if seeing something inhuman. That day it became clear this was no longer just about toxicology or psychology, it was about belief, and that was the most dangerous part of all. The verdict came after 13 hours of deliberation. Marina Duarte was found guilty on all counts: multiple aggravated homicides, attempted murder, and destruction of evidence. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. When the sentence was read aloud, she showed no reaction, no shock, no sadness. She stood, straightened her blouse, and walked out flanked by guards as if it were all part of the plan. For many, that moment was the most chilling. Not because of what she said, but because of what she never did. She never once asked, "Why me?" And that silence, the same silence she had shown through every death, was the last piece of the puzzle. After the trial, new testimonies emerged. A former co-worker recalled how Marina once spoke about death as cleansing. Old neighbors said she'd disappear for days. Before each tragedy, always returning with excuses. One even claimed to see her leave at dawn with trash bags, contents unknown. Meanwhile, inside prison, Marina's behavior unsettled everyone. She spent hours staring at the same corner of her cell, murmuring words no one could understand. A guard once found a small figure made of thread and hair hidden under her mattress, wrapped in paper marked with symbols. Was it psychological breakdown, manipulation, or a window into something even darker? Even in prison, Marina Duarte inspired fear. Her surviving son, now an adult under a new name, spoke publicly for the first time in a documentary. With his face obscured, he described rebuilding his life, how certain smells trigger nausea, how he avoids metal spoons, how silence still makes him uneasy. But one line left the audience speechless. "Sometimes I miss her voice, because it was all I had." That sentence revealed the cruel paradox of his life, how love and horror had come from the same person. Marina never appealed her sentence. In a final letter she wrote, "What had to be done is done. The rest is just noise." And with that, she vanished from the world's stage. But the damage she caused never did.